What's up, Rockstars? Today I'm going to be doing a review for Twisted Fables by Diemension Games. At the time of posting, it's on Kickstarter right now, so there'll be a link down below, but for now, let's go ahead and talk about the game. Now, as always, I'd like to start out with a quick shout out to my patrons and YouTube members. It is through their financial support that much of this channel is possible. From the lighting, to the camera, to the microphone, to much of the games that I do cover are all thanks to them. Now, trying to be transparent here, this one was sent to me for free. If that wasn't obvious, it's on Kickstarter. You can't quite buy it yet, though I do plan on backing the deluxe version because I want miniatures. With that out of the way, and with you knowing that I'm already going to be backing it, let's go ahead and dive into it. Now, I'm going to explain the game just very briefly so that I can just speed through what I want to talk about and not have to worry about it too much. So, you have a character card. Each character has a special kind of rule set up here, and then 3 different supply decks, one doing attack, defense, or movement, or at least resolving somehow around that. Your attack, your defense, and your movement. And then you have these epic cards, which you get when your health drops past your breakpoint, which is right here. You also have a defense tracker here. You can't go past your max. And you have a power track. You'll have 9 spaces, or in a 2 versus 2 game, you'll have a few more. And you can move around based off of movement cards. So you'll have some of these, and you'll have some of these basic. So you have an attack, or a defense, or a movement. And it's as simple as placing a movement to be able to move. In this case, you can move 1, and you gain 1 power. Otherwise, you can attack at range 1 and do 1 damage. You can raise your defense by 1. And then however many you do, you go through all of their actions you want to do after drawing your 6 cards. And then you are done and you spend your points accordingly. So for these points, as you gain these, you can buy upgraded versions. So you can buy up to 2s or 3s that obviously are worth more power and do more damage. Now, when you add these, they go into your discard pile, and over time, your discard pile is reshuffled back into your regular deck, and that's how you get more cards. Same with if you buy better versions of what you have doing here. Now, as you're buying them, you'll uncover twists, which you get instantly, and twists can do different things. I will be discussing these twists in a little bit, so I'm not going to go over that too much, but then there is a final twist on the bottom of each deck as well. Now, you can play this with these flipped over. And that is kind of the basic way you would play, where you can move around and attack and move and knock back and stuff like that. This is the Relic mode, where you flip them over to the Relic, and in which case you can discard a skill card and it'll do different things, depending on kind of where you're at. So this one will heal, whereas, another one might allow you to destroy a card, which is useful if you have a whole bunch of level 1s in your late game and you want to get rid of those so you're not drawing them as much. Or being able to play something you normally wouldn't be able to play via Alakazam. There's all kinds of different ones there. There's a big old 50 card deck there. There are repeats, but there's a good variety there. And otherwise you keep going until you eventually either defeat the other person or you break and get your epic card, which you get instantly. These are the super fancy cards. They're very good. Otherwise, you have some cards that are ongoing. You can gain different tokens depending on what you're doing, and it's just a normal fight to the death. That's pretty much the game. The only other thing I want to explain is quickly that I did not play the 2-player version, though you probably could get away with it. The 2-player version is just that. It's 2 different lanes. So there'd be 2 more people here, and you have 2 different lanes, and each lane kind of shares the Relic, and so only one person can use it or whatever, but you can move from one lane to another, but like this person isn't attacking that person kind of thing. And then of course you have a few more. The reason you can't quite play it is because what you need is another tray and then more of these trackers, but that's really the only thing you're missing for 2 players. So if you're fine like hoking it and you have you're writing it down, you could technically play 4-player with just the 2-player set. That being said, I didn't think it was that pricey, so I'm not too concerned about that. Okay, so that's the basic gameplay. Let's talk about the rulebook, the storage, and then all about the gameplay. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the rulebook. And this is a pretty well put together rulebook. They have a lot of lore and the different advantages and disadvantages and tips on how to play the different characters, which is fantastic. I love the lore. I love reading about that and the kind of the world building. This is very useful when you're first starting out, which is awesome. Very helpful there as well. And just in general, there's a lot of call outs. See there, it's talking about kind of the two-player version of it. It's right there in the core rulebook. They have an important themes here, kind of in the middle. I wish this wasn't in the middle and instead on the back page, or at least the last page, or the first page. It's something more easier to flip through, though it is in the exact middle, so it does fold or open into that pretty easily. And then it does have pretty much what is an index at the very beginning here under key topics, but it's not perfect. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So we know it's an index, not a table of contents, because first of all, it's not just listing the headers. It's in alphabetical order, and it lists multiple pages, like a basic card here, 6, 9, and 10. That's great. The problem is it's not perfect. So, for instance, I had a question on range. So let's go ahead and follow that. So I had a question on a range. So we're going to look up range, and it's page 9. So let's look up page 9. And I realize this is detailed. We'll get to the fun stuff here soon. Okay, so I was Red Riding Hood, and I had a sniper attack that was range 3, right? And it says here's range 1, 2, and 3. The question I had was, could I attack somebody closer than range 3? In other words, in like range 1, can I use the snipe ability there? Now here it talks about if they're outside of beyond the range, you can't use it. So if they're range 4, you can't use it with a range 3 attack. Okay, that's fine, but it doesn't say anything about earlier, so I wasn't sure. Now, if you actually go to that middle page, which again is not the easiest thing to get to, which notice it didn't list page 13 for range, but here in range, it says the card effect takes effect on an opponent within range X. That within is the key word that I needed, but it didn't list page 13 on the index. So that's, at least an example I had, an honest example of an issue where I wasn't quite sure about things. So, it's still good. I'm going to count it as a positive because it does have an attempt at that index, but it's not perfect. That being said, the game isn't super complex, and so it's pretty easy to just kind of figure things out. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the storage. So, here is kind of the base box. And again, this is the normal version, the non-miniature version. I don't know what the miniature version will look like. But as you can see, it fits sleeved cards. And yes, I did sleeve my cards. You're going to shuffle these a lot, so it definitely helps to sleeve them. And it fits. And look at all this extra space. Now I have a whole bunch of cards out here, but even so, won't fill all this. I suspect that if you backed at this level and got the 2 expansions and no miniatures, this would fill up just fine with all of the expansion cards as well. Very impressed. So it has a little spacer here, and then over here is the second tray I don't have out right now. And then you have your character cards. I'm going to keep these out because I'm going to talk about them later. And then your standees. This is where Alice's cards go. And then you have some tokens and some other stuff here. There's honestly more room than you even need. It's quite impressive. Works out very well, and very happy about it. It's that nice black, thicker plastic, so it doesn't crinkle, and it just looks slick. So very happy about that. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty details of the game and what I liked and didn't like about it, I just wanted to say that, in summary, this is an easy-to-learn game. I played with my 11-year-old daughter quite a few times, and no problem at all. She was able to play on her own, make her own decisions. And while it wasn't always the most strategic thing ever, she was able to fully hurt me and kill me and do all this stuff. And so it's definitely a system that is more nuanced and less complexity. In other words, it's not just trying to layer on a whole bunch of stuff. It's having a few core simple things that all interact together, which I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, that kind of add to that strategy level. So nuanced, easy to learn and play. Okay, so let's talk about characters, because really that's the highlight. And you get quite a few, even in the main ones. You get Mulan, you get Alice, you get Red Riding Hood, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, and Kaguya. Those are your options from the core set, and they all play differently. So like I said, each one kind of has a special rule here. I'm just going to talk about just an example. So let's talk about just Mulan here. Okay, so if you have Mulan, you're going to have 34 health. You can only have 3 defense, which is the lowest out of the bunch. And then you can have 17, you get hurt down to 17, and then you have your epic card, right? Then you transition to having that really awesome card in there. You have the different decks. I'm going to go into there. Let's talk about her special rules. So her special rules is kind of interesting. While she can only gain 3 defense, right? As she's sitting there with her cards, right, in her hand. If she's attacked, she can play one on the opponent's turn to essentially negate whatever she does. So this would negate 1 damage, this would negate 2 damage. And then she gains that many ki. And so with that, she can gain all these ki. Well, why is that useful? Because not only is she able to essentially, as long as she's drawing defense cards, have an unlimited amount of defense. There is no real limit. Normally the limit is 6, but she could have 3 defenses in here and block 9 damage. Not only does she have that, plus her normal 3, which again you would think is lower if you play this way where you spec and you end up buying a lot of these defense cards, right? If you end up with a whole bunch of these because you chose to, then you would have a lot of defense. You'd be able to play them right out of your hand like that. Now, you're not drawing cards per se, and so you're losing those cards, so you have less options, but she has ways around that too. So let's go ahead and dive into some of these. So this is her first deck, and it's for attack. This is very interesting, and this is the reason I chose Mulan is because I think she's the best example, but not the only. They all do this on why position matters in this game and why it's important to have either standees or miniatures and what you're doing around it. So just her level 1. Let's go and take a look at her level 1. This is what you get right away. Now you have to play this with an attack card, so you have to pair it with an attack card. Now anytime you're doing that, you're not gaining the, let's focus on that. There we are. You're not gaining the power you would normally do, so you're only gaining power from this one. This is just there to pay for the cost. You're doing damage plus whatever you do. So if you played 1, it's a 1+1, or a 1+2 if you played a level 2 attack, or 1+3 if you played a 3. You may place the opponent into another range 1 space. So let's say that you moved and then you attacked her. Well, now you can move her over there, right? If she is on the edge of the fighting track, you randomly discard 1 card from her hand. Now, this actually happened. So essentially, she cornered me all the way into a corner here where it was like this. And so she had moved me because she kept flipping me over, and she has other ones where she can pull you towards her, or ones where she can move to you and then flip you. So she has this like electric whip that she's like whipping you around. And then once I'm on this end of the track, either end of the track, she can start randomly discarding 1 from my hand. I'm losing cards actively, losing abilities, losing skills, losing my epic card, all sorts of nasty stuff. That's kind of a great way to play her if you spec into this. It goes further because there are a unique twist each one. This is the channeled ki. And it says when you attack with an action or a skill attack, you may spend X ki to gain damage plus X, where X is no more than 3. So all this that you're gaining, right, from your defense cards, you can now pump up your attacks. And you have to unlock these, so you have to be speccing this to get this. But then you can keep going and get the, one that does even more damage. And eventually you get this Gathering Storm. Now this Gathering Storm is going to be in the bottom of every single deck, and they normally stack. This says at the beginning of each of your turns, gain 1 ki. This twist effect is cumulative to others. So if you spec more into your skills and less into the basic attacks, then you're going to have less defense cards, but you'll make up for it eventually by gathering more ki every single turn up to even 3, which is quite impressive, plus any defense cards that you use. Now, it could be different. You could go for defense, where you have more defense, you're getting less damage. In this one, you may spend ki to draw extra cards. Now, if you recall, I talked about how if you're spending defense, I'm sorry, it's not focusing. If you're spending defense, then you're going to have less cards because you're spending it. But with this, it'll focus. There we go. You can actively draw more cards. And of course, then you can do it twice or 3 times. And eventually you have this evading fate, where it says after you draw cards at the end of each of your turns, you may discard 1 card from your hand and then draw 1. So you can kind of get the cards you want. And then again, eventually that. So again, very cool. Now let's talk about this one. Now this is no retreat. Again, it's range 1, damage 1. This is a knockback. Knock back the opponent, however many spaces you paid for this. Then place yourself into one of her range 1 spaces. So you're literally like pushing her, but you're going with her, right? If she's on the edge, then you may randomly discard. So if you combined these two, then you are really just trying to push and pull and move people and flip them around to the edge of the board, either this edge or this edge, or you're just discarding cards constantly. Then she has an Enlightened Assault. This is the unique twist for here. When you use a move action, you may spend X amount of key to move extra spaces, so you can move around more and kind of do what you need to do. Now, if we're going to look at our epic cards, there's this one, Honor's Thunder, a range 1, so you have to be right next to her. Spend all of your key to gain damage X, where X is the amount of key you spend. So if you're spamming all of this key, you can have an amazing, amazing attack, unlimited through this. This is huge. So why you would only pick that, right? Well, not necessarily. This one, Legend's Call, when you draw cards at the end of your turn, draw 4 extra cards. So I talked about how you can already draw extra cards, and then you combine that, and suddenly, my daughter, when I was playing her as Mulan, she drew 13 cards. You normally draw 6. 13 cards. It was a huge turn. She did a ton of damage. It was incredible. Confronting Chaos. Place yourself into one of the opponent's range 1 spaces and gain 3 key. This can instantly teleport you all the way across if you need to, or nobody thought you were going to be doing any damage, or maybe they pushed you back. Well, not only did you get to them, but then you added all the key. So if you combine that with a slam that does extra damage, you can pump your key. Again, massive damage. Now, that's just one character, and I'm going to go into a few other characters on a lighter level here in a moment, but I want to kind of show the nuance here. So you're kind of navigating on how many of these cards do you want, and each of these pay. So this costs 1 power, and then this costs 3 power, and then this costs 6 power. So if you have 7 power, you might want to get, let's get 3 movement. Now you have 1 power. You could get another movement or another level 1 card, but do you want to have that extra 1 card? It can help pay for a skill. If you don't have the card, you can't pay the skill. You can't use the skill. That being said, it'd be great if you didn't have so many of these level 1 cards in there. How do you do that? Maybe you get one of the wilds where it can be one of each. But again, it's just the level 1. So maybe you want to get rid of those cards somehow if you can. Mulan doesn't really have a way to do that, so you're kind of stuck with those cards. So you kind of have to navigate how you're building your deck depending on what you're doing. And you can shift gears and change different things. And if you're getting hit really hard, maybe you need to add more defense and not worry about being all offense here. But then there's this Relic, and this Relic is huge. So this is exactly how it was set up when I played with Mulan. And the problem you'll notice is with the random draw, I have 2 of these that are the same. Both of these heal. So I can discard a card, and then whatever level I discarded, I gain that much HP. So now my daughter has to decide, okay, I'm flipping people around. I do extra stuff and discard cards at the edge. However, if I push him to the edge, then he can heal. And especially if I push him to another edge or allow him to use different stuff and I'm moving him around a lot. So what do? Well, so eventually she was avoiding that, so I couldn't heal. But eventually she was like, no, I need to get rid of the cards. I was drawing too much. So she pushed me there. And guess what? I healed. But you kind of have to judge that as you're playing constantly. Because each time you use it, you flip it over and then eventually that goes away and you replace it with a different one. And maybe that's good, maybe that's not. Now I can look up a card and find something. Oh no, right? Or maybe an Alakazam went there. Now I have an extra option there. And, it might be, again, something else and something else. It can keep going. So, as you use them, the world is constantly shifting. So the movement in this game, the placement and where you are is huge. It's important if you're here versus here. It's important if you're here versus there. The knockback plus movement is huge. So many people that I've noticed so far don't really spec too much of movement because you want to do damage, you want to be defensive, right? Movement seems kind of boring. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit more about movement, but it's huge because if you have all these awesome range 1 attack cards, and that's great, but if I pushed you back 3 and you only have 1 movement, you can't attack me. All that's wasted. So that's a big point. It really matters, your movement and where you're going and where you're at. Huge in this game. I was really surprised by that. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at another example here. So here is Alice, and Alice is unique because her special thing is that she has multiple personalities. She can be the Queen of Hearts, the Mad Hatter, or the Cheshire Cat. Well, what's the difference? So you pick your first one. Maybe I want to be the Queen of Hearts. Your attack cards gain +1 damage. That's huge. Or your movement cards gain -1 movement. Not so good. Means your level 1 movement cards, they ain't moving you at all. Means your level 1 attack cards are now hurting for 2. So you're hurting a lot, you're not moving. Mad Hatter, your defense gets +1, your attack cards get -1. So if you want to defense up, huge. We want to be Mad Hatter. That being said, you're not going to do much damage. Then you got Cheshire Cat, where again, your movement goes up and now your defense goes down. So you can move a lot and you can attack normal, but now you're not going to be very defensive at all. The thing with her is she has to swap every turn. So if you picked Queen of Hearts this turn, well, now that goes away, and you need to pick Mad Hatter or Cheshire Cat. Maybe, okay, I'll be defensive. I attacked last time, I won't attack this time. Okay, now that goes away, and now you can pick between Cheshire Cat and Queen of Hearts. So you're constantly shifting and constantly doing focus. But they realize that, and so a lot of her cards allow her to change midway, mid-turn. Now, this is, again, a little bit more advanced as a player because you can actually kind of think a few steps ahead and look, okay, well, right now I can't do any damage, but if I play this, even though it's going to lower my damage by 1, this is an attack card, I then can go to Queen of Hearts, and so then I can play my level 2, and I'm already in Queen of Hearts, I'm doing more damage. But maybe because I was Cheshire Cat and I was far away, I wanted to be able to move, and so I was, maybe I did a Curiously Agile where I can move farther ahead than normal, and so I can move, get the plus movement, and swap to attack, and then attack and hit hard. So you can do those kind of combo things with her. One of the funnest things about her is, again, you can spec as essentially the Queen of Hearts into this long range damage where you're doing a ton of damage at like range 3, or you can be extra defensive, or you can do all this movement. The movement's cool because as you move through someone, that matters too. So if I moved 2, I can move through her. So it's move 2 plus whatever I played in one direction. And if I move through the opponent this way, I draw 2 cards. In this one, you're drawing 3 cards. So suddenly I'm drawing all these cards, and guess what? I can move multiple times. Bam. Now I moved again. Draw more cards. You can keep doing that. It's devastating to the point where they might want to be in the corner just so you can't constantly move through them. If they do that, they've countered your build, and now you have to kind of shift or somehow get them away, or, do whatever you need to do to be able to still, kind of defeat them. Let's look at her epic cards real quick. I'm not going to look at these. I want to look at these 2. So Important Date allows you to essentially do another turn. You get this card, you lay it down. After this turn, you draw 4 more cards, go again. Not your full 6, but it's still huge. And if you're in the movement, you can keep drawing more cards. And only to get more, you can have a huge turn. That is why this power track goes all the way to 25 for stuff like that. Or, this is great. The game's afoot. Range 3, damage 3. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. You did some damage. Shuffle up to 5 basic cards from your hand and or discard pile to the opponent's deck. So remember how I said that early game, you're going to be getting these because that's really all you can afford and you need the extra ones and all that. Well, eventually you don't want these in your cards. So if you can take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 regular movements and give them to the other player, now they're stuck with these low level movement cards that they probably can't get rid of. And you just made your chances of getting these higher level cards higher because you got rid of some other options. So that is hilarious to do. And just go back in your hand. You can do it multiple times even. It's great. Additionally, if you're playing against someone like Snow White, what Snow White does is she has these poison cards that she puts into your deck, which is really bad, right? Because as you draw them, they waste a spot and they can start hurting you. They're just not good. They're only worth like 1 point, so it's just bad, especially late game. So that's not good, but maybe you can give her some bad cards in her deck as well, make her kind of taste her own medicine, which would be kind of nice. Sleeping Beauty is huge because she has 2 sides. So she gains these awaken tokens, right, as you damage her, and eventually she becomes awake. And when she becomes awake, she is stronger and can use these to pump her skills to do all kinds of damage. And she does this until she loses all of her awake tokens. She has ways to where if you build her right, you can actually keep her awake. But she can't actually gain defense at all. She can't do the defense action, can't gain defense. So she is nothing but aggro. The opposite is Kaguya, who can naturally generate defense. And in fact, one of her epic skills allows you to deal damage based on the difference in your defense. So again, another huge advantage if you play as her. But each character feels different. So when you're playing Kaguya, you feel like, a seasoned swordsman that can deflect any kind of attack and then strike really hard. Or if you're playing Red Riding Hood, you have all these ranged attacks and movement that you can go through. I already talked about Sleeping Beauty. I already talked a little bit about Snow White and her poison, and Alice and Mulan. They all play so differently. They all feel different. There are different ways in each character to be able to play. So I can play Alice different than you play Alice, and I can even shift midway through, and depending on who I'm fighting, I might change, and it is just really, really impressive. My voice is going out. I'm so into this. I really enjoyed playing the different characters. I've played them all now. I've played against them all. I can only imagine what adding 2 other characters does to this, whether there are synergies or whether you're having to deal with poison apples, plus being thrown around and what that does to people. I imagine she could position your characters, and then if you paired her with, somebody like Sleeping Beauty, who's moving through, you can do move through poisons. So you're moving through and poison and getting people in range, and all sorts of amazing stuff is possible with just these. I've been really, really impressed. Some use tokens. They use tokens differently. Some are playing cards on other people's turns. Some are building up something else. Some are choosing to hurt themselves. There are some that you can hurt yourself to do extra damage and do stuff like that. All kinds of play styles here. Really, really impressed with that. Now, before I move any further, let me just take a stack of these cards. And it might just be me, but the art is gorgeous. It has such great art. I have been so impressed with the art. It really is good. None of it looks cheesy. None of it looks too CG. All of it looks pretty. The coloration's good on everything. There are some rather, dark images when it comes to theme, but nothing terrible, at least not in this core set. Just really, really well done art that is just always, always impressive. So I loved the art. It was definitely a plus. Anytime you have a card game, I think the art's important to look at. And I must say, I was happy with what I got here. Okay, so I just want to point out as a positive, I want to make sure this is noticed, that you can play regular mode, right? You can play Relic mode. You can play 2-player. You can play 4-player. You can play some simpler characters like Red Riding Hood and Snow White are fairly simple. In fact, the rulebook says you should start with those when first starting out, which I did, because other ones, you're doing some advanced stuff on other people's turns and using different tokens and doing that kind of stuff and transforming your character, constantly switching, your avatar or your personality. So there's a wide range of it, from simple play to advanced play, to where I feel comfortable playing this from anyone from my parents and my daughter to somebody more like my, main gaming partner that could really strategize and do, kind of more advanced combo-y kind of stuff. Definitely a wide range of skills and skill set expectations and just variety. So, maybe you don't want the added thing of relics and you just want to do raw battle. That's fine. And then you change it up, add those relics in there. Suddenly, you have all that. And that's really awesome. And I love the versatility that offers. Okay, another thing I want to make sure I count is how epic these epic cards are. The fact that you can just pump and suddenly do 19 damage if you play your cards right and you do all the different things, or drawing all the different cards you can do, or, sending other people your crappy cards, or, a frabjous day where suddenly, everything is just accumulative and is added more. Everything gets +1, and that's added to all your other +1s. So you're playing a level 1 card for 4 and a level 3 card for 7, and it's just crazy. This game has a lot of epic moments where you're building up and you play your cards right and you're saving your key and you're saving your awake tokens, and suddenly you're fully awake for the rest of the battle. So just when they thought you were out, suddenly you have that epic card and you're constantly awake. You're just dealing tons of damage and their health is just gone. A lot of those kind of epic times that are just really satisfying to pull off when your strategy works and you plan it, or you counter strategy. So, we're knocked in here. Well, I want to do this, and you weren't expecting that, and all that stuff's awesome. Okay, now I've talked enough about how great this game is. There are, of course, some negatives. Now, normally I intersperse this more, but in this one, they make more sense at the end of this. So I'm going to kind of explain that right now. So one of the things is it can be a little fiddly. So let me explain. If you have 6 cards or 7 cards or whatever, right? So you have your cards, and I'm just going to, randomly draw. I don't care, right? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. And now I, gained 1 of that, and then you get hurt 1. So you're just going to put your defense down. And then I'm going to, move 3. So I'm going to move 1. I can't move 2 and then 3. Okay. So then I did that, and I gained 3 2, 3. And then you can get ones where, you're adding okay, now I'm going to add 3 defense. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and that gives me 1, 2, 3, and that allows me to then buy this. So I'm going to buy that, and that's 1, 2, 2 down there. And as you can see, it can kind of add up, especially when you get something like 14 cards. Not only is it a little fiddly in that, and then I played this, so I have to remember to get that too. Or a single card can make it to where, you change your defense, you change your power, you add something, you subtract your power, you have them do that, and then you add your token. And there's a little bit of that. I'm fine with it because I like the systems, but especially adding this power, just always, we tended to just add the power after all of it and do the buying afterwards. It just simplified it and made it a little bit less fiddly. If you're adding the power every single time, it just adds a second action to every card you lay down. You can lay down the card, you do that. Especially because sometimes it's like, okay, I do that and now I get to discard a random one of your cards, so you discard that, and then, but then you can play something on my turn, so you're going to negate some of that damage. Okay, that's fine. Then you don't take that damage. And it can get a little fiddly. Additionally, and I've kind of mentioned this a little bit, but when you get like 14 cards or have an extra turn or constantly drawing cards, you just go until you're done. There is no kind of back and forth per se where I do an action, you do an action. Instead, it's I do everything I want to do with my deck, and then you do everything you want to do with your deck, and then, or your hand, I guess, really. And then I do everything with my hand and then everything with your hand. And everything with my hand could be a lot if I have a big hand, right? Or if I'm constantly adding to my hand mid-turn. So there's sometimes where the turn can feel like it drags a little bit for the other person. Now, typically, because again, it's either 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2, you're always involved. You're being hurt or you're being damaged or you have to make a decision sometimes. But for the most part, there's not really a defense unless you can play it from your card like your Mulan or something. So, Kaguya can counterattack essentially, which again feels that kind of shinobi feel for like, you attacked me, I attack back. But for the most part, you're just kind of updating this a lot. But you move these a ton throughout the game, and it can sometimes feel a little draggy. Not too much, but thought I should note that. The last thing, or second to last thing, I guess I want to say is it could always use more characters. Now, I know there are expansions available in the Kickstarter, and I personally am going to go for that because when it comes to any kind of card battle system or skirmish system or anything like that, variety is king. You definitely want as many options as you can possibly get. So the more, the merrier, especially when each one is so unique. Now, another issue I had is this flimsy board here. As you can see, and this is, we've played Mulan once here, and look at the amount of bend on there. It's insane. I've been trying to store it upside down and trying to flatten it. The problem is that they're just so skinny anyway that, especially when you have to put tokens on and stuff like that, you end up touching it and it just naturally tends to curl. I haven't been able to straighten it yet. I really wish these were thicker. This is very, very skinny. Which is rather unfortunate because this is probably the most unsightly part of the game, minus maybe that. Now, lastly is this right here. So as you can see, your game board is more or less loosely 9 cards drawn together for the most part if you're playing a 1 versus 1. I would like a board of some kind, even if it just had the slots where I put this in. It just makes it feel a little bit more formal, perhaps. They have a neoprene board, I know, and again, I plan on getting that because it solves that problem, right? However, it just feels a missed opportunity for some of the theme, right? Because you just see my wood table underneath here, and it would be great if there was even just a little bit of art of some kind, or a little bit of color, a little bit of something that matched it besides my, dining room table here. So anyway, that is kind of it for me. To summarize, I really, really enjoyed this game. I found myself constantly wanting to just play this game. At work, all I could think about is, oh man, I wonder if I could get a game in during lunch. And when I don't always feel that way for a game I review, this is fantastic. It is so enjoyable. To theory craft how you're going to build a deck or how you would counter a certain character build. So if I know that the person in Alice loves to always go, Mad Hatter and gain all this defense, well, how would I prevent that? How would I stop that? Who would I pick to do that? And how would I build them? Or and then they could change midway, especially with Alice because she's changing constantly. So maybe she then goes Queen of Hearts. And so watching what your opponent is buying and trying to figure out what their build is, or it just, the constantly shifting kind of world, essentially, or the level that you're on, the stage that you're on, going back and forth, which already it feels kind of like a 2D fighter. It's a ton of fun. I cannot recommend this enough. This is my favorite card game right now because I'm not playing Magic the Gathering. Seriously, super enjoyable. I loved every part of it. The art's gorgeous. The fact that I'll have miniatures and a neoprene mat and more characters to pick from just sounds awesome. So if any of this sounded good to you, and if you're looking for maybe a cheaper game than what I normally cover, there is a link down in the description below. I don't get any kind of commission for it or anything like that. I'll probably get a thank you from them for saying that their game is nice, I guess. But, I've said negative things about some of their other games too. So I'm trying to be fair here, but I cannot hide my enthusiasm for this. This is a fun game, and I cannot wait to play it again tomorrow. So by the time you see this, I will be playing it again, hopefully. Ton of fun. Love it. That is Twisted Fables. Where's the... Oh, it's over there. Twisted Fables by Diemension Games. Again, that's on Kickstarter now. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions at all, feel free to ask. And as always, have a wonderful rest of your day.